Well, hey, welcome to Clarksville Vibe the Show. I am your host, Kevin Kennedy Jr. So glad to have you on another episode. We are here consistently telling the stories of the people who live in and around Clarksville, Tennessee that make this place the greatest place to live in America. We've been bringing you fantastic guests, and I promise you today's is one that you will want to stick around all the way to the end of the episode. He is certifiably a legend in our community, in the athletic community, and in the farming community. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. But I did want to send a shout out. First of all, thank you to Peachtree Apparel. They provided me the shirt. If you're watching on YouTube, hashtag I Love Clarksville. They saw our episode with Candace Coleman a couple episodes ago and loved her passion for our city. And so thanks for sending us this shirt and sharing the love for this great community that we all get to be a part of. Well, I do want to introduce our guest today, Coach Jeff Jordan. He is, as I said, certifiably a legend, coached in this community for a long time, achieved more coaching success than really anyone else that I could name, state championships in multiple sports. I think it was a 17 or so year streak where they won the region championship in wrestling, and I will let him get into that. He has probably first and foremost produced some of the best men in our community, people that I have known for multiple decades, and all of them have at one point or time shared with me a story about how Coach Jordan either ran them to death or produced this great, enduring spirit in them to face all of life's challenges. And so I am incredibly excited to get into his story today. Part of the reason that we're doing this is he just released a book. The name of the book is Your Coach is a Farmer, and I've dug into it quite a bit. It is a lot about how coaching relates to farming, and it's telling a lot of his stories as he's grown up through the years, through the coaching ranks, but then also in the farming business as well. So, hey, Coach Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I know farmers are incredibly busy, so whenever you're away from the farm, it's a sacrifice, and I really appreciate your time today.
Everybody always calls to tell me my cows are out, so I didn't bring my phone in for that reason.
Yeah, that's funny. I have a similar experience. I remember a few times in school, I would get checked out because my dad's goats got out of the fence, and we'd have to go chase them down in a neighborhood. Now, my family farm is kind of in the center of town. It's where I grew up. We had horses and goats and things. I know yours is a little bit more out where your neighbors, see those cows. And there was a couple stories of that in the book so far that I've encountered that seemed to be pretty funny. But for our audience, I would like for you to at least introduce to us the meaning behind the title. Your Coach is a Farmer. It's a little different of a title. They don't necessarily know exactly what the book is about, but I want you to share from your perspective the motivation for the book, and then how did you come up with that title?
The title is a line out of an old cheer that people used to cheer against each other when I was down at Franklin.
Oh, okay.
And it was go back to the woods. Your coach is a farmer and your team is no good. And it's really a disparaging cheer against the coach, but it's even more so against the farmers. And, I think that great farmers are some of the wisest and most productive people I know. And, we could stand with a little more of that common sense wisdom these days.
Absolutely.
As less than 2% of the people were born or lived on a farm now. So, a lot of that natural wisdom is gone. And, I sort of tried to blend some of that into coaching stories, but
naturally a lot of farming stories along the way as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what I've enjoyed a lot about it is, the nuggets of wisdom that can really be applied in any industry, whether that's farming or for me it would be dentistry or another industry. You've made that connection to how the realities and the truisms of life apply to so many different circumstances. And the illustrations that you draw these from that are meaningful and powerful to you kind of shape how you use them. And we'll get into some of those. I've written a couple down because I'd love to hear you explain them a little bit more. One thing that I did think was incredibly powerful is who you dedicated the book to. It was your wife. And I'd love to, for you to share a little bit more about that and maybe how she was an inspiration to you to, as you put in the book, continue coaching, even when maybe you decided to give up a few times or wanted to be done and, back to the farm life. And she identified to you that this coaching that was inside of you was a natural gift. It was a spiritual gift from God that you have unique to you to inspire people and to send them on to greatness and for them to achieve things that they couldn't just achieve on their own.
All that's true. As the beginning chapter talks about, it was sort of a teasing battle where she would always say, "Oh, you were born to coach," and I don't believe any of us are born to do anything. Mm-hmm. I think that we're given some potential and some tendencies that might lead us there, but I think that we have to take a lot on ourselves to develop something like that. Mm-hmm. And what you were saying about how it translates to different industries, I think anything in the book that pertains to coaching pertains 100% to being a parent.
Yes.
A parent is the ultimate coach.
Wow.
They have them 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, that's why, people will ask, well, who's this for, farmers or coaches? Well, goodness, farmers and coaches are the ones that might know some of these things. Yeah. The other people, that's who it's for,
Wow. Yeah. And I would say it's definitely for me. I'm neither a coach right now. My wife played college soccer, so she takes all of our head coaching duties in our household for our kids. Nor am I a farmer. Second generation, I don't live on the farm now. But I've found a lot of wisdom in reading parts of the book that I have, and I would say that I would see that. Right off the top in the first few chapters, you tell this story of how you originally started coaching in Franklin. You coached some wrestling down there, and then you came up and became the Clarksville coach. And there was an interaction with a coach at Springfield there that really jumped off the page to me because I think it says a lot to your character. I'll let you tell the story, but what was spoken to you was, I've been around them Clarksville boys my whole life. They're nothing but losers. And then you went on to produce this more than a decade-long journey of nothing but championships. And so tell me, how did you receive that? How did it spark a fire in you? And how did you know that comment wasn't true of any person?
Well, I believe that we all have huge potential. And I think, in Franklin, it was a different set of challenges, completely different, and the athleticism and everything. But I think sometimes we assume that what we see is the way things were made. And, in Franklin, I wrestled at Franklin. We were never state champions when I wrestled there. There had never been a state champion there before I coached, and we became state champions. At Clarksville, they were bigger losers as far as wrestling went, but he caught me on a day I was ready to get out, and I was sitting in the hospitality room thinking, these people, because they resisted. I mean, they, in their defense, their schedule was something like wrestle Northeast twice and Northwest twice, and whoever the weakest sister was, they could find to wrestle and call that a season. And if they beat the other two teams, and football was like that too at that time. Whoever was 2-8 was the top team in football each year. Yeah. In Clarksville, they were the Clarksville champs. But I don't think it's just like what I was saying about being born to coach. I don't think anybody's born to be a loser either. I don't think anybody's born to be a champion. I think that it takes huge work to be special. Some people, it takes a lot more. We all have different points of departure. Yeah. So our destinations tend to be different also.
Yeah. Well, a coach's ability to see potential in a player who's not yet met that is really a gift. My first memory of learning about you was 8th grade. After 8th grade summer, I played baseball with Jacob Crass, and he played center field, I played right field, and we were playing in the summer. He's like, I'm trying to wrestle, and this Coach Durkin guy, he's killing us. I never ran this hard. I never ran this much. Like, his is so brutal. He's like, there's no injuries out there. You just keep trying. You keep trying. I was like, it's a good thing I'm going to Northeast because I don't know if I can handle it. And, for the next several years, I kind of followed your coaching career from a distance and was always just so impressed with how tough your athletes were. I knew several of them around my time personally, and they've just come to be great leaders in our community. They lead great families. If there's one thing, if you wrestled for you for a long time, you're tough. And you mentioned that in your book about how toughness is still something that you almost have to learn, and you have to push kids towards it because you're maybe not naturally tough to a certain degree.
Whenever we would have a meeting at the beginning of wrestling, the parents, they all would come in with fear, most of them, because they'd heard stories which were not really true, but or they were exaggerated.
Yeah, the legend grows in some of those.
I would tell them the reason why I coach is because kids need character, more so now than ever, because I grew up on a farm. My dad used to drop me out on a fence row at 7 o'clock in the morning and then come pick us up at 11, take us to eat some cheese and crackers, and then we'd go to the hayfield.
Yeah.
And that was called summer vacation.
Yeah. And I laugh because my dad used to drop me off at his rental houses with a push mower and a weed eater and a sack of crystals, and he'd show back up later. No cell phone.
but people don't have those opportunities anymore. Kids don't. Yeah. And that you had some growth there. Yeah, it's tough. It's mentally tough when you're in a place where you really would prefer not to be, and you have to work your way out of it. And I think that with all things, if we don't give kids opportunity, and that's what I was telling them, I had opportunity to develop character. I lived on a dairy farm when I was in high school, and that nothing's worse than that because it's every day, and the hours suck. But as far as kids, the kids that I coached up here, I didn't have that much in common with them in my background. The one thing that we had in common was our sweat. We worked together and we worked hard and we pushed. And when I was younger, and in wrestling, it's a very hands-on thing. So the only way I could gain respect in Clarksville was come in wrestling with them all the time. Of course, I did that at Franklin, but I was a kid at Franklin. So
yeah, that's great stories. There are legendary stories of hearing you. I don't know what you call it in wrestling, but carrying people up the stairs, and Ted Young's basketball practice is going on, and the basketball players are looking up in the stands at the wrestlers, thinking, "Man, I'm glad I'm down here dribbling this ball instead of up there with them." But to take those Clarksville boys that somebody jokingly said we're never going to be winners, and to create nothing but a legacy of winning, I think was.
I don't think he was joking. And he's a wonderful guy and a friend, and I respected him. But no and never don't really work for me, because I don't believe in those definitives. I think that anybody can.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful statement. Well, I want to get into some of the analogies that you made and how you connected to them. One of them is the feed bucket, right? And this idea that there are times where cattle need driving and athletes need driving, and you use this analogy of to get the cattle, you got to figure out what is the thing that's going to change their behavior to create a desired return, and it's the feed bucket. And then you talk about how athletes have this feed bucket as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
The athletic side, I remember especially in wrestling when I came up here, that it was abysmal. Okay, when we won state in 1989 at Franklin High, some of my kids were looking. They used to post the scores on the side of the gym, just little put up things, and they're like, "Look, Coach, we had like 134, 35 points, and we won." And then they said, "Look down here, Coach." And they looked down, and at the very, very bottom was Clarksville High, -2. And they all started laughing. "How do you even get -2? I said, 2 unsportsmanlike penalties.
Oh, goodness.
I said, so not only were they
losing,
poor, but they were poor with bad sportsmanship too. and I came into that, and it wasn't, it was a tough place to come into. And, I think that when I first started there, the number one thing you can change in wrestling is strength. And I came in with I was a lot smarter of a coach in Clarksville than in Franklin. In Franklin, I was tougher, rah coach. In Clarksville, I tried to do things a little more scientifically and tried to make things physically, as far as fitness and strength, the kids had a huge advantage. And eventually, I mean, it didn't take very long where it started paying off. And once it starts paying off, that is the feed bucket. You know, whether you're given prizes or whatever. I mean, we had weight challenges and all these kind of things. And the kids did incredible things.
Wow. Yeah. I remember some of the wrestlers around that time. You know, you look at them and you wonder, are these really human?
Yeah.
Are they still human?
I walked in the Hall of Fame or whatever at Clarksville High sometime this year. Yeah. And when I was going down there, I looked at the 2000 picture and all the kids. They all have biceps and
Matt
veins
McCarty,
popping out of their arms.
That was the guy you knew. You just don't mess with him.
No, Matt was a killer.
That's good. Well, feed bucket. It was a great chapter. Another one was the way Granddaddy did it, and you kind of tell this story of, hey, sometimes things change, and the way Granddaddy did it doesn't mean the way we have to do it now. And I want you to tell the story about, you know, at least on the cattle side of things, how, you know, you were served up this $20,000 steak, and you said, guys, why are we still doing this?
Not 20. It would have cost me $20,000 to continue to do things the way that they were doing it, carrying their cattle to the sale barn and taking, you know, the hits on commission and all the other things. I mean, I've always tried to sell direct and was trying to lead them to be more progressive, but.
And they were just doing things the way they always done it.
The way things were. Yeah. I mean, they liked the status quo because it was a lifestyle that they enjoyed. They weren't really that interested in making more money. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, some of those.
So how did that relate to your athletes of changing over time and adapting as a coach?
You know, I think it might be even in that chapter, but we wrestled Franklin High the first year that I coached there. We had the schedule stepped up quite a bit that first year and progressively thereafter. But we were wrestling them maybe the second or third year, and we were at Franklin. And after the match, we won. And, you know, they were still a really good team. And one of my old wrestlers from Franklin, he came up and he's like, what in the heck was that? And I'm like, I told you we would get better. He said, I knew you would get better. I knew you would probably even win. But what were y'all doing? Because we were doing a whole different set of moves than what we had done at Franklin. Wow. We were attacking the head. We had a crossface series that was feared, and we brutalized Franklin. And, you know, and that was the team that the first time we wrestled them, I was just hoping we would score. And we scored. We may have won 2 or 3 matches out of 14. But,
changed and adapted and came through and got the victory. Yeah,
I think, you know, being willing to adapt as a coach or a parent or whatever. I mean, you can't. The way your grandparents did it is not the way it is. I mean, my grandparents didn't have a cell phone. My grandparents didn't, you know, they had a minnow net, but not an internet, you know. So, you know, a lot of things have changed, and to think that you can function in a world
just doing it the way they did,
just completely out of the world, you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question, because we talked a lot about wrestling, and much of your career was also soccer. And so at some point, soccer became part of your coaching journey, and I'm sure you had to change around that. So tell us how soccer kind of became a coach that you, or a sport that you became heavily involved in coaching, and tell us about some of that transition and adapting to a whole different sport.
Well, I loved soccer. I thought it was a really cool sport. I grew up in Franklin, and I never heard of soccer until I was like a senior in high school. Wow. And some of the little kids were starting to play it there at that time. But so it wasn't really an opportunity. In college, I had to take 3 courses in order to be a teacher. One was volleyball. I love volleyball. I had no ups and bad shoulders, but I loved it. Gymnastics, I was a natural gymnast, you know, a tumbler.
Sure.
But which probably helped me in wrestling, but took it mainly because there were really cute girls in there. And then soccer, I took soccer because I'd seen it on Wide World of Sports, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
And, to go from there to where I ended, girls soccer was the best coaching I did in my life. I learned how to teach things that I didn't think were teachable. I learned how to teach creativity. I learned how to teach probably toughness and courage. We had little games that we played that were just phenomenal teachers.
Yeah.
And I didn't write it. If there were one chapter that I could have added, it would have been situations. How I learned how to use situations to teach things, whether it's in soccer or in wrestling. And I think that's the way we learn best, is getting in the situation.
It's simulating a situation in a practice.
Right.
Okay.
And I mean, a lot of people love drilling. Drilling is great. Coaches love drilling because they can draw it up and it works precisely the way it robotically is supposed to. But drilling was part of every practice in wrestling or in soccer. But there is the transitional part of the game and the sport of wrestling and soccer or any sport. And that is what those little games teach you. They teach you how to roll with the punches. They teach you how to implement what you're trying to drill and trying to do as a team. It transfers over to the game.
Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, I learned it the hard way because I had my son Hayden was a gifted player and he was created by naturally. I didn't have him when I started coaching girls soccer.
Okay.
And I did have some little girls that I'd been coaching for a long time, and they helped bring it to the team. But eventually those were gone.
Wow.
And I was still coaching.
Yeah.
And I had to teach it to kids that I'd never taught it to. And I mean, I'd spend nights trying to come up with something. Yeah, I think I can teach that.
Wow.
And
I want to hear a little bit about your girls' soccer journey at Clarksville High, naturally, because I met my wife. She played soccer here at Austin P, and I remember during my high school years, this was before you started coaching, girls' soccer was fun to watch, but we almost knew that a Northeast or a Rossview or a Clarksville was going to be the district champion, maybe get a play in the regional championship, but you probably weren't going to win a Beach or a Gallatin or whomever came.
Never.
Yes, probably
never won.
Exactly. And then I was in Memphis, I believe, or maybe had just recently come back to Clarksville when you were there, and you had these really 2 seasons of just back-to-back, dynamite runs, and they were different seasons, if I remember from your book correctly.
That's 3.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that time and maybe some of the wisdom that you learned from coaching a different gender, a different sport, a different set of kids, and how to motivate them in a sport that really Clarksville had never seen success in.
Well, they had never seen success in wrestling, but soccer on the boys' side, they had a little success. Coach Donahue was successful; he took them to state final one time, I think. But on the girls' side, my older daughter Dylan, she was a fabulous athlete. I mean, she played in college, and I watched all of my kids. I was down to my 4th kid when I took over girls soccer, and that was like 12, at least 12 games. They'd never, ever, ever beaten Hendersonville. None of my kids, never. I mean, they would, like you say, they might win district, and they would go and they would run into the shut door.
That's it.
And it was over.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how good they were. It was a place that they couldn't get beyond. And, I remember talking to the girls. I'm like, what's your goal? And they're like, beat Ross, you and Mama. I said, well, my goal for you is to do something that nobody's ever done.
Wow.
And that was the very first year. In that very first year, we lost to Hendersonville 2-1 in regular season, and that's the last time we ever lost to them in the next 7 years that I coached.
And you think it was a mentality shift?
Oh,
do you think it was just
entirely.
improvement of talent? Or
Not really. We came in with 4 little girls.
I love that answer as a parent now, because I look at my girls who are growing up and I get to see a lot of kids in this area through my dental practice, and I think a limited mindset looks at them and says, well, there may not be the talent here in Clarksville, or the schools are too far spread out, or lots of excuses, and then somebody like you comes in and says, no. Our goal is the state championship. We're going to change your mentality.
Well,
We're going to change your toughness.
I did not know if we could win a state championship yet. Early on, I did. After the first year, I knew we could.
Wow.
The second year, the problem was I learned about dealing with girls' mentality and backstabbing, getting in your own way stuff. Yeah. It's just a negative tendency that we developed a no complaining rule. No whining. It was no whining allowed. Ella Baggett, who wonderful, fabulous, most goals scored by any player at Clarksville High, still probably. It's like 140 goals, something like that.
Wow.
And Ella, one day I remember she's like, and she said, I know, I'm whining. I'll run after practice.
I know it's coming.
I just can't help myself. So, it is a mentality. And that's the way it is with everything.
Yeah.
And the girls, they did not know to dream big because they didn't think big was possible.
Yeah. I know I certainly didn't.
I remember
Crystal
Hetland, Coach Hetland's daughter.
Sure.
She came up to me after the first season, and she said, last year soccer was an afternoon activity. She said, this year we're a team.
Wow.
And it was true. And they were a team, and they sweated together, and it was tough. And was it easy? No. I had so many girls that hated me because I do not believe in tenure or whatever you want to call it, seniority. Just because you're a senior, I think you should be better. But if you're not better and a freshman's better, we're going with the freshman. Mm-hmm. You'll still have time. I don't discriminate against any class, but it's what you bring. It's what you have to bring it, and you have to bring it every day.
Yeah, I remember in your book, I highlighted it. It said, my favorite player is anybody who can make it through my practice.
That's true. And so I saw somebody, the first year, the girls cried a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
During fitness type things.
Sure.
But, it's just like wrestling. The one thing in wrestling, we could not let other teams be stronger when we weren't very good. In soccer, no one could be more fit than we were. We had to be more fit. Most teams, the Franklins and Brentwoods, they're shifting in teams.
They're just
they have
deep.
20, 30 players that could all start for me. But, when you have 11 or 12, you got to be fit.
Yes.
In the big games, you can't. And other people can add some minutes and give you a little bit of rest, but you have to be able to be tough, and you have to be able to be fit. Yeah. So mental toughness and fitness, they've always been in the recipe.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little good segue to another chapter in the book called Planting Potatoes. And, I don't have any idea how potatoes grow other than what I read in your book. But what I recall is that the potato is underneath the ground, and you're looking for this potential, right? And so tell us a little bit about how planting potatoes, the process of potatoes growing, is related to an athlete's development.
Well, an athlete's development, yes, in every way. It's just like those girls. One of the very first practices, I think it was in August, and it was hot. And that's when I called those girls over, and I said, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do something that nobody else has done. And somebody's like, beat Rossview? And they're like, no. You've beaten Rossview, or Clarksville High's beaten Rossview.
Sure.
But, a region championship, beat Hendersonville, do something new and something different. Of course, that team ended up going to state. They beat Franklin, that was the best team I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And we beat them at Clarksville High, and we had one senior, and she transferred in, and she was injured. She hardly played in the game.
Oh wow!
So it was fabulous, but playing potatoes, I think the biggest thing about playing potatoes is the story of of sports, amateur athletics, is it's about character development. I mean, those kids you were telling me about, the finest young men in Clarksville, and I agree. And, I try not to talk about it because that's the kind of stuff that'll choke you up, because those are the potatoes.
Yeah.
That is what you plant.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of athletics, is that it puts seeds in you that continue to grow forever.
Yeah.
And you can't see it. You don't know it. I said, when I told parents at the beginning of the season, the number one thing I'm interested in is giving them a chance to grow character. At the end of the season, always, every banquet I can ever remember, it's like, we won the duels and the individual in 2000, and I'll guarantee I still told them the most important thing and things about this team is what happens on the inside.
Wow. Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you remember.
Right.
That's what identifies you for life.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares to see your letter jacket anymore.
No, that's such a true statement. We're 23 years after that championship now, and the reality is the toughness that was instilled in those young men, and the Dylan Jennings, who happened to learn from the Caleb Midgets, who I'm sure learned from someone right before him. The character.
There wasn't many people before Caleb. Bo, his older brother, but Bo was a freshman the first year.
Yeah.
The first year we had like 6 wrestlers, so everybody else was a freshman.
Yeah.
And those freshmen ended up, when they were juniors, they were the first team ever to win region.
Wow.
In the whole county, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Wow. I did want to ask you about this, because I'm sure, there are some coaches listening to this and thinking, how do I improve myself as a coach? And one of the lines from the book that I think really stuck out, and it was a point you made, that athletes are addition, but coaches are the multiplier. And you gave the analogy that parents used to say, hey, if you're on our sideline, you're worth 2 goals, and so talk to some of the present day coaches now in terms of maybe someone who's not really feeling the potential impact that they can have on students, either because they're looking at it from a limited mindset of, I don't have the talent, I don't have the bodies, or whatever. How would you encourage them to be the multiplier in that instead of just being the addition? And how did that relate to farming? I think that was cool too.
I think the number one thing, you said it a while ago, and I didn't respond to it, is the mentality of, I don't have the athletes, I don't have the players, we just don't have this, or we don't have that. I know from kids that walked in the door and kids that walked out the door that people don't know what in the heck an athlete is. You can. I was telling Jason Pennington this just yesterday, is that I put kids in situations where they learned, the Mac McCartys, their hips get off the mat. They cover you with their hips. They do things instinctively. I learned how to teach those kids by putting them in situations that they have to get their hips up. And after just a little while, a few calisthenics, a few line touches, a few different situations, and all of a sudden that kid's an athlete.
Wow.
And then the people out in the public or in their opponents see them, and they're like, and then they're strong, and they're like, man, look at those athletes.
Yeah.
They weren't athletes. They were just average kids that walked in the door.
Wow.
But one thing they did bring is they brought the courage to come in, because wrestling is in your face.
Yeah.
The same thing, soccer, it doesn't quite take the same amount of courage, and football doesn't, because there are times when a kid knows that they're going out there against the defending state champion, and they're a freshman.
Yes.
And they're just trying to survive the match.
Yeah.
And eventually they learn how to adapt and how to do things that are going to enable them to be more successful.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're put into a situation where you can't say, hey, coach, I can't handle this player. Can we double team him with the guard?
No.
It's just you and the coach.
Yeah.
and you're just trying to make it to be 15.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, right.
So.
And you gave this analogy of how it related to farming, that, cows are the addition, and you gave some math behind that, and you said, but bulls, those are the multipliers.
Yeah, they are. It's changed a little. I don't know if you know Tyler Zilkowski. They do ETs. So
Okay.
cows can now, in that type of situation, can also be multipliers. But, for me, a cow can only give me one calf unless they have a twin in a year. But the bulls, they can give me 25, 50 calves in a year. So.
Yeah. And so I hope if you're a coach and you're listening, I hope that you're having some encouragement to know that your job is important, number one, but the potential is up to you. And, what is an average person that walks in the door as a freshman or even as a junior with some determination and some intuition and direction, skill development, that person can become an athlete and really create a competitive advantage for you.
Absolutely. And anybody, all right, that's part, we got when we're talking about the title.
Yeah.
I mean, it implies that a farmer can't be a coach, or a coach can't be a writer, or a writer can't be a parent, or all those. You can do anything. Some things require, it's hard to be a coach and a parent. Usually you have to have a cutoff where you become the parent on the way home.
Yes.
And my kids all call me coach on the field.
Yeah.
Because that's
what your role was.
that's
right
who
yes.
I was to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody, that's the whole purpose of that Born to Coach thing, is I stumbled into coaching. I walked through the door. I became a teacher so I could eat instead of starve while I was waiting to write a book and make enough money to eat, which I would still be starving. So, I took a job teaching, which ended up putting me in coaching. And how I got into soccer, I mean, a lot of people, all the people thought I couldn't coach soccer because I coached wrestling. Mm-hmm. By the time I got to Clarksville High, I already knew I could coach soccer. I had coached a team that was, D1 state champs.
Wow.
And had played in, I don't know, four Premier Leagues, Southeastern Regional stuff. And I had progressed. And so when I came to Clarksville High, I just didn't know if I could get those girls to win.
Yeah.
I knew I could do it. I wasn't born with that. It's something, I had to take classes. I had to learn. I watched a lot of soccer. I have a mind for it. That's the God-given part. I do have a spatial mind that can play out situations.
Yeah. What a blessing.
But anybody can coach.
Yeah.
If they have the desire to.
Yeah. What an encouragement. I do want to end on this. This is so there's a lot of analogies between coaching and farming through many of the chapters of the book. And at the very end, there's a section on truths that are really just kind of one page, kind of punch you right in the mouth. And one that stuck out to me was greatness is not heritable. It's not inherited. It's got to be earned. It cannot be gifted or bestowed. So tell us a little bit about that. I may have just summarized it all, but
you did. I mean, that's just the truth. I can only just say, we look at people, you and your father, or you and your brother, or you and greatness is not that. Greatness is a seed inside of you, and it has to be nurtured, and it can be grown. And I think we all have greatness. We might not have the same greatness. And just like I went to dinner with after a book signing with Stanley Ross. Stanley was on the 2000 team. Wonderful kid. When he walked in, he was a noodle. When he walked out, Stanley would have started for any other team in Clarksville. He was probably right behind Matt McCarty and some of those kids he was a fill-in. But it changed him. And I can tell. I see it in his eyes. He wanted to buy me dinner after the book signing. We all get different things from sports. It doesn't have to be a ring. To be honest, if it is a ring, you probably have lost it by now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter. And if it matters that much, you missed all the important things. You missed the potatoes. The potatoes are what it's all about.
Man.
The things that get inside of you and grow for the rest of your life.
Wow. That's a nugget, and I know we'll clip that up and share that, because there's a lot of wisdom in that for parents who are raising athletes and coaches who are coaching athletes, and then the athletes themselves, because you're right, those days go by and the Letterman jackets gets put in a dusty old closet and the ring gets misplaced, but it's the potatoes that are put into the ground and nurtured and cultivated and grown over time that produces the Stanley Rosses and the Dylan Jennings, the people in our community who are, solid men leading solid families, people of integrity and honesty and high moral character.
And paying it forward.
Yeah, and paying it forward.
That's
Absolutely.
what I'm so proud of them about.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a lot to be proud of. We are certainly glad to have you as a part of our community and achieve all the things that you did. I'm going to show the book here to people on the screen. So here's the book. Your Coach is a Farmer, Jeff Jordan. On the back is Dorrance Publishing, Dorrance Publishing. I think you can get the book from them, also Amazon or Kindle. If you ever see Coach Jordan around town, be sure to say hey. If you see any of his athletes, I'm sure they've got some great stories to share of either the old days or how you're still blessing them. But hey, if you have made it to the end of this episode, just thanks so much for being a part of our online community. My commitment to you is we're going to keep bringing you people like Coach Jordan who are and have been making a positive impact in our community for a long, long time to make your life better, make your family's life better, but also give you an appreciation for Clarksville and just this vibrant community that we get to call home. Hope you go back, scroll through some of the previous episodes, but also we will catch you on the next one. Thanks so much.